Warford updates with Mr. Warford updates with Mr. Warford updates with Mr. Warford.
What's up? Welcome to another episode of Updates with Mr. Warford. Today we're talking about current event forms. You should have already looked in Google Classroom and found a Google Doc that explains this assignment. This is for anybody that is still kind of struggling, doesn't really know what to do. So what you're going to do is go into Google Classroom and you're going to find one of the current event forms. Okay. I try to make this as simple as possible here on the current event forms. So if you follow my cursor, you have name, the unit. So if you're in AP Human Geography or Integrated Social Studies, you're just going to put the unit. Is it Unit 6? Is it Unit 3? Whatever that is. Title of the article that you found. It can be online sources, which a lot of you will probably do. It can be paper sources or physical copies of stuff too, whether it's the local newspaper, whether it's a magazine, something like that. Works cited. If it's an online source, all I need is the full URL. So the link that you see at the top of every website that you visit. Notice it's not just the name of a site. It's the whole URL or link. So if it's CNN, don't just put CNN. CNN has thousands of articles. I want to be able to access the specific one that you read. So you would put cnn.com/HPXF6_45318, whatever. If you don't want to write all that, which is perfectly understandable, you can go to a website that's a URL shortener. If you go into Google and just put URL shortener, tons of websites that will take a really long URL and make it short. One that I really like is bit.ly.com, bitly.com. So look at this form. Summary of the article. So what's the main points of the article? It's not just rewriting the first paragraph. It's what is the article about? How does it relate to class? This is the part that trips a lot of people up. Make sure that you use content vocab. Show what you know. So don't just say, this article was about geography. Tell me what specifically about geography. Go into detail. Write as if someone doesn't know what you're talking about. Write as if you're not writing to me. You're writing to somebody who's never heard about government, who's never heard about geography, who's never heard about the Bill of Rights, anything like that. Write it as if you're trying to teach somebody something, and that'll show me that you understand what we've been talking about in class. How does it relate to you? Examples of ways to answer this question, if you look here in the parentheses. Does the topic of your article have a positive or negative impact on you or those around you? How would you fix the situation? What is your personal opinion on the topic? Could you or your friends make a positive impact on that particular situation? Don't overthink this part. A lot of people ask me, they say, Warford, it doesn't relate to me. A lot of local, national, or even world news in some roundabout way affects you. So is there a law being passed that's going to affect how much money you make at your part-time job? Is there extreme weather that's happening in another state that's going to possibly come to your state or your town? Are gas prices going up? Is there some kind of military thing that's going on across the world that could possibly get the United States involved? Any of that can somehow, even in a small way, affect you. So if you can't figure out how to relate it to class and you can't figure out how to relate it to you, you probably need to pick another article, which is fine. Just find one that works for you. If you are still kind of iffy, you're like, Warford, I don't know what you're talking about. Here's a great example of one that got 100%. Okay, Greg got 100%. Notice, he put the unit. He even said what the unit was, which you don't have to, but he went above and beyond. Got the title, date of publication, the full URL. He didn't use a URL shortener website, which is cool, but I checked and I can access this article. At least last time I printed this off. The article may have disappeared on the internet by now because this is kind of old. But that's neither here nor there. So, summary of the article. Notice he filled up all the lines. That is a requirement. You have to fill up all the lines in writing, unless you have an excuse that you can run by me, some kind of medical excuse why you can't write it, but you have to write it. You have to fill out all the lines. Again, not being a jerk. We're just trying to get prepped for when we move on into the higher grades and possibly in college where you're going to see word counts, page counts. We're just going to go ahead and get in that headspace. How does the article relate to topics discussed in class? I'm not going to read this whole thing because you can, and I'll attach this as well in Google Classroom. But notice that he talks about the executive branch. He tells us what it does. It enforces the laws. We go down here. He said the bill was written by Congress and passed into law. Talks about 2 houses of Congress. So he basically gives us a rundown in that little chunk of how the U.S. government works. So I know he knows what he's talking about. And then he's got the how does it relate to you. Again, you can read that on your own time. I'm going to attach it. So you would, every time you do a current event, I'm going to tell you when they're due, how many you got to do, and you're going to have weeks, usually with an S, weeks to write them on your own time. So if I were to try to do one right now, I would go to a website, a reputable news website. This one is USA Today, and I found this article. Whoops, let me scroll up. Lead was poisoning the water in Flint, Michigan, and this doctor tried to show people what was happening. So I can write about that. A lot of different ways that could relate to geography, could relate to government, could relate to some economics that we're going to talk about. So I found a great article. I'm going to read that. I'm going to access either electronically or in person. I'm going to fill out the form, make sure that I cite my source, and if it looks something like this, like Greg did, every time, you will get 100%, and you'll do great. If you have any follow-up questions, if you need to rewatch the video, if you need to relook at the frequently asked question Google Doc, go ahead and do that, or email me any questions you have. Remember, always cite the source. Always show what you know when you relate it to content or relate it to class. You got to write it, and you need to upload it into Google Classroom. If you have issues with Google Classroom, you can email it to me. When we're in person, you can just give it to me. Put it in my homework box that I have. But if we're working through NTI, non-traditional instruction, working online at home, you're going to write it out, take a picture of it with a phone, iPad, something, and put it in Google Classroom. And if you can't do that in an emergency, you can email it to me. All right. Like I said, if you got any other questions, let me know. Peace.